Before we start with the episode, I'd like to give a short shout out to another podcast. Have you listened to any book podcast?
Not really listened to any book podcast, but I've listened to general recommendation podcasts, which sometimes recommend also books.
I've tried a bunch, and usually they fall into the category, I think we talked about it, that they just over-explain, they interview the authors, and it's kind of dry, or they just have it like a joke show, and you don't really learn anything. So finally, I found a good book podcast recently, and I wanted to give it a shout out, and vice versa. So it's called Book Retorts, and Sam and Danielle from the US, they have an idea that one of them picks a book, and they explain it to the other person who doesn't know anything about it.
All right.
And they try to convince each other that it's worth reading, or that it's a good piece of media, and they take turns. I've listened to the first episode, which was a book by Isaac Asimov. The name of the book is The Gods Themselves. And it was really funny, because I always thought that Isaac Asimov is like a very hard sci-fi serious writer. But in this book specifically, a third of the book is like based on 3 gender alien sex relationships, which and one of the genders is called the hard ones. So I was like, what?
The hard ones.
So basically, Sam tried to convince Danielle that this book isn't complete nonsense. I'm not sure he succeeded, but I really enjoyed it. So thank you, thank you, Sam, for making this show. You've successfully persuaded me not to read this. And
the title you said is The Gods Themselves?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
So they started doing books, and then they shifted into movies and like TV shows and other series. They've already up to episode 76. It's been going for a while. I really like the podcast, so I wanted to recommend it. So if you're interested, just go to bookretorts.com or search for it on iTunes or Spotify or all the social media. I think they're all over the place.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm gonna try.
Okay. So let's get into the episode. This is the second episode of the Mind Like Books podcast, where we collectively mispronounce the word book. Can you say book, please?
Book.
Which I say book. And but as you know, if you're British or American, it should be book.
Yeah, I guess
not
so.
book. But because I listened to too many Canadians for reasons, I always say book. And Martin on the previous episode and Paolo also say book. So welcome to a bunch of Europeans discuss books.
I feel like, I don't know, maybe because it's one of those basic words that you learn like in elementary school.
Yeah.
And so you never bother to learn it with the right pronunciation.
It's completely understandable. Yeah. So I sincerely hope that you find our accents charming and not irritating. But thanks for tuning in again. On the second episode, we've decided to look at some of our favorite short stories. And I've also had some feedback after the first episode and some self-reflection. So we'd like to try to improve, make this better, and learn a little bit with each episode. And that's why we want to tackle shorter stories first before we dive into Dune and such insanities.
Which is the real reason why this podcast exists.
Yeah.
To talk about Dune at some point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one of the things we want to improve is that I mumble, I don't open my mouth, I speak too quickly, while Paolo speaks very nicely and in a relaxing way. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I like that. So I think you're the best co-host for a book podcast.
I'm not sure about that qualification, but I'll take it. Thank you.
Great. And I never say any names in real life nor in fictional life.
Yeah.
So even though I wrote them down last time, I didn't say...
I mean, Japanese names are difficult. That's all I can say. This time there are fewer names.
Yeah, this time there's going to be 3 names. So just if I don't say them, I'm going to be really bad at this.
Yeah.
But other thing I failed at was the summary of the plot in the previous episode. It was overly short and jumbled up, so I'll do my best for those who listen and haven't read it to make it clearer to know what we're talking about. So sorry about that in the previous episode. So that's about it for the introduction. How are you feeling today?
I'm good. Yeah. I wanted to thank you for suggesting this short story. Because,
really?
Yeah, we're starting with the one you suggested. Yeah, because I feel like I would have never read it otherwise. I want to say, like, I'm not a big fan of short stories, to be honest.
Okay.
Like, I find it really hard to read them usually. So I'm really glad when I find something that I actually enjoy as a short story. So yeah,
that's awesome. This short story is definitely, if you ask me, my favorite or the best. I don't think it's the best, but it's definitely the one I remember the most and affected me the most when I was younger.
Okay. That's not a great thing to say.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
For people who know about the story, I don't think that
it definitely hit home. Like it hit hard, and I had many things to relate to very strongly, and I had a lot of things to think about. And it was the first time I ever read something that it really made me like think.
All right.
That's why I remember this so much.
Okay, I guess that's a good way to put it. Like, it's definitely the kind of story that lends itself to a lot of reflection. Considerations after you finish reading.
You could say it broke my naive teenager's heart.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, anyway, the story is called The Changed Man and the King of Words. And it's by Orson Scott Card, which still is my favorite writer of all time. I've read a lot of his things, by far not all of his things, because he's insane and he keeps writing new things and starting new series. Yesterday, I checked on his website, headtrackriver.com, which I like. He also does like reviews and things. So I also like read his blog and stuff. And he already, like, since I last checked, he started like 4 new series of books or something.
Wow.
It's like, damn it, just stop writing books and finish the stories you're writing now.
Yeah.
So, I don't think he can finish that at all. Like, he was born in 1951. So that's like,
so he's 70.
70.
Yeah.
So he looks fine. He's in good health. He loves writing and everything. But so many books. Damn it! Stop writing the books.
I mean, let him enjoy his his retirement, even though he's not retired. Like
he lives with stories, and I think this story is also like personally relevant to him because he wrote this as one of the first things that became really successful in 1982. It was before Ender's Game, which made him famous and won a bunch of awards and started all these like insane series. Like before the Ender's Game, he didn't really do a lot of long sci-fi series, but when the Ender's Game made a lot of money, he made like 5 books of Ender's Game, and then the same story from a different point of view, the Shadow Saga, from like a different character from the same story, 6 more books, and then there is like some sequels, prequels, short
why
stories.
Is there like one more book if it's from another character's point
I don't know. I'm not sure how many more. But
this character speaks more.
So then there is a prequel of the Ender's Game and a prequel of the Ender's Game, and he's like co-writing it with somebody, and I've read all of it, and it's pretty good, but it's too much.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it.
Yeah. So I'm a fanboy, so it's definitely affecting why I chose this story.
Yeah, for me personally, like I had never heard about. I shouldn't say I've never heard, because I feel like you told me about Ender's Game before. So I've heard about him before, but like if you had just asked me like, oh, who's this guy? I would have been like, I have no idea.
Someday in the far future, we might do like Ender's Game on this podcast.
Yeah.
But I actually prefer to do things that are not so blatantly famous. So I think Ender's Game is one of the most famous things.
Yeah, I guess so.
Which Dune is also, but nobody reads it, and that's why we should talk about it.
Yeah, Dune, is really famous, but...
So that's an exception.
Yeah, and also like Dune, everyone only reads the first book because they're terrible people.
Yeah. Anyway, to get back on topic,
yes.
This story was released first alone, and then released again in a series of short story compilations. The first one was the most successful and was called Maps in a Mirror. And it was part of a series called Tales of Dread, like horror stories, which is why the ending happened. And
yes.
And if you read this story and don't read the last paragraph, I think it will improve it so much. Because I feel like he added the line at the end just to make it a horror, because it's in a horror collection. If it wasn't there, it wouldn't have to be there. Like, the ending is completely fine without the brutality.
That's true.
That's what I want to say.
No, I agree. At the same time, I feel like if the story didn't have a brutal ending, well, I guess we're spoiling that the ending is...
Well, we're just saying it's a bad ending. That's
anyway, if the story had a good ending or like pleasant ending, I guess it would be boring. Sorry,
okay.
I don't want to say boring, but like...
I see what you mean. It wouldn't have a punch at the end.
Okay,
I see.
All right, I'll forget about it like after a week.
It feels very real, and then the ending wouldn't feel real at all. That's what I mean.
Yeah, I feel like the ending like really seals the story.
Okay, that's a good point. So my speculation was that he didn't want to have that there because he added it only for the horror, but that's just speculation.
Okay, yeah, could be.
Yeah, so just a few things to say before we get into spoilers, because there's not much that we can really talk about without spoiling this. So one of the things I like about the story is that it merges mysticism and science, kind of, which is the type of story I enjoy. That they don't really say it's magic or something, but they hint at it. And it's not really supernatural, but it kind of could be. And it feels like it, even though it's like justified or explained. So that's the right like line in between nonsense magic and like hard sci-fi that I like.
Yeah, that is true. It is... I don't want to go back to talk about Dune, but it does kind of like that same like
exactly.
mystique.
That's why I like it.
Which is grounded in like kind of science.
Exactly.
So that is definitely true. I didn't think about that, but it is true.
Also, it's very provocative. It's like shoving in your face a bunch of ideas, and you do something with them. It's just trying to make you think by any means necessary. And I think it's very, very easy to read. Like one of the easiest things to read. That's why I liked it when I was a younger child.
It is definitely easy to read. Like I read it on the train as I was going to work and then coming back home. And
it's like, super clear. Like everything happens. You absolutely know what happened, why. Everything's clear. That's why I like Orson Scott Card, because his characters' motivations and thoughts and feelings are so clearly explained. That's what I like about his work the most. Like again, Dune, they have paragraphs about the thought process of the characters. So in this short story, it's the same. They have in italics, like after somebody says something, sometimes they say like what he meant, which is like, you wouldn't need this, because if you think about it, you know this, but you wouldn't think about it sometimes and you would miss it. So I appreciate it. Yeah. Because they tell you what they meant.
That's true.
And especially for, once again, being a teenager, it helped a lot to understand what they wanted to say. So anything you want to add before we move to spoilers?
Well, I would say, like, I would recommend most people to read it if you can find it at e-version, like an e-book version of the story. I would say to give it a shot. Even like for me, I as I said, I personally don't really like short stories, but it's very easy to read. It's very quick. It gives a lot of food for thoughts. So
it's the gateway drug to reading.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's a gateway drug to reading, but it is definitely easy read.
I guess that answers the last question. Would you recommend it? So.
Yeah.
Read it!
Yeah, I would recommend reading it.
And don't read the whole collection of stories. They're very hit and miss. So there's like 7, maybe even 10. And some of them are just blatant like exploitation horrors, like disgusting like gore. Some of them are like kind of thoughtful. It doesn't go well together, I didn't feel like. So I wouldn't recommend the collection of stories, but I recommend this one. Okay, so let's move on to spoilers, and we have a lot to talk about. We'll see if it's short or long. I'll try to make it concise somehow. So to try and do a better job than in the first episode, let me give you a short summary of what happened.
Yes.
So this story is about stories and a family of 3 people. Alvin the father, Connie the mother, and Joe the son. And the son is a genius. He's really, really clever. He loves to pretend to be characters in stories.
Yeah, it is like this small family where all three of the characters are clearly representing like something.
Okay.
So the father is clearly like the hard scientist who only believes in science, only cares about science, the deterministic reality.
Okay.
While the son is the creative genius, and the mother is the emotional side of the family, I would say. So, yeah.
Okay. So he gets into stories, and the whole premise behind this is that people love stories. They like to rationalize their life by putting it into stories, comparing it with stories. People are just obsessed with stories. That's why the son Joe is obsessed with stories, and it's just his whole life. He just loves being in stories. And the father is very rational, and he hates that. So he tries to get the family away, and he bans the son from like playing pretend. So the son does it in secret with his mother, and at the same time they study, and the son is really clever, so the father teaches him. Until one day they find a set of tarot cards in a bookshop, and the father buys it for the son, and the son becomes obsessed with like the stories, because the tarot cards can mean anything you want. So he can tell the story, like interpret the story, say anything they want about the story. And he, because he's very clever, he wants to make a program, like an application that will lay out tarot cards in such a way that they will always tell the truth about people. And he becomes obsessed with making this application. The parents are worried, but he finishes it, and it works like too well. And people are very worried about it, except the father, of course, doesn't believe any of it. And he lays out the tarot cards for his mother and tells her the truth about her life, and she's like horrified, completely like done.
Yeah.
And some scientists catch wind of that, and they test it, and they like do some studies, and they find, not conclusively, but like above average positive results, that they actually work, like the cards actually tell the truth about the subjects. But they need one thing for that to happen.
They need to be honest when inputting something. They can input anything they want into the software, but they need to be open and honest about it, which is what the father doesn't do in his
so
first
the father
test.
Pretends to trick it.
Yeah.
But they also need the son. Like, it doesn't work without the son.
Yeah.
So that's where the mysticism comes in. So it's this like the hard software, but it doesn't do anything unless the son Joe interprets the cards, because he's so obsessed with stories. He's read all of the stories. He memorized all the characters that he just wants to like impersonate with the cards, and just explains it so well that it scares people how true it is.
Yes. So the whole basis of the thing is that he's able to read the future using tarots, not because like he's just like a normal fortune teller, but because he has this sort of like scientific ground to it, which is given by the software. So the software is laying the foundation for him to do fortune telling, which, as you said, is kind of like this mix of mysticism and science.
So, of course, the father hates it, condemns it, forbids it, doesn't take any part of it. And as you'd expect, the whole story culminates with the father finally doing it properly and losing his shit, basically. So
I feel like, in a way, he lost his shit. But at the same time, after that, it's more like the son lost his shit. Like,
that's the question, yeah.
Yeah, like towards the end, it felt like the father was... Yeah, I mean, he wasn't the best person with words, but at the same time, because you see the ending from his perspective, it doesn't feel like he was doing anything that bad. Like, he was just...
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so the name of the story is Changed Man and the King of Words. So the son was the king of words, telling the truth, and the father felt like he was a changed man, but was he a changed man? That's why I love this story, or why I remember it, this single point in the story, because at the end the father wants to change himself to do what his son tells him, and he does it so hard that he does it so much worse than if he didn't do anything. And
yes,
and that's the point that I like. This is why I like the story, because he does everything in his power to stop doing or stop making the mistakes and stop being an idiot and realize the truth and just like listen to people and change and do it better. And the more he does it, the more he tries to listen, and then the more he tries to improve it, the worse it gets.
Yes.
And it's such a personal, like my personal problem with me and people.
No, I agree. That is, personally, it's my favorite theme in stories. The way it's treated in this particular story, I like it, but I also don't so much. I'll talk about that more later maybe, but it is my favorite point in stories. The whole idea that people try to fight back against a sort of predetermined destiny, and the more they fight, the more they get entangled with their own destiny. And like, I feel like good stories are the ones where they left you thinking whether, like, in doubt whether, you know, the people, the character trying to struggle against their destiny is the source of the bad things happening, or whether it's just really bad destiny. If essentially, like, if bad luck and predetermined destiny exist, or if we create our own bad destiny by trying to avoid the
that's more my point of view.
Destiny. Yeah. That is, to me, like, that's the most interesting point in stories overall. Like, probably my favorite story of all time is about that. But of course, it's a big part of Dune. Because
like every 5 minutes,
how can we not?
Dune reference.
Yes,
make it a drinking game.
Making a Dune reference. Of course, it is a very, very big part of Dune. I feel like in a way it's also a small part of the three-body problem, which is the book I'm reading now. But yeah, in general, it's an extremely fascinating concept to explore.
This like we can talk about this for like the next 5 hours. So please stop me very soon. But I want to say that there are two things that come up with this discussion. One of them is the concept of destiny, like you said, and free will, and the other one is the fear of not knowing what you don't know, which is personally my biggest fear.
Right.
Like we talked about it in the first episode when we talked about Shuya in the other story, that he had this like personal demon and he didn't know he had it. He was so much in it that he didn't realize that he doesn't know something, or he couldn't even see that there is something missing or something bad. Yeah. Combined with that, the curse of putting all of your effort into making it better, and because you don't know how to make it better, or you're making it so much worse. It's like so terrifying.
Yeah, it is very, like, it's easy to like project yourself into the story and project your life into something like that. To be honest, okay, have we finished with the summary of the story, I guess?
Yeah, okay, so before we continue, the ending, it's that, so the father hears the tarot card explanation, and he's like trying to dismiss it, and he's like trying to rationalize it, and then there is a point where the son like completely breaks him, and the father starts apologizing, and the son explained to him that if he wants the son's life to be full, complete, and unaffected, he has to either leave and leave him alone, or die, which is very morbid. Yeah. And he says, I understand, and I think he means it, and he believes that he understands, but he just stays and tries to push him into more stuff. And at the end, the son just wants him to shut up, and the only thing he wants him to do is to shut up, and he just keeps saying that he will shut up, even though he doesn't shut up, which escalates in the son to like smacking him in the head and accidentally cutting his throat with the vase or something that he smashes on his head.
Yeah, he smashes something made of glass.
And as it goes through, like as it breaks on his head, one of the shards like cuts the throat accidentally. So he didn't want to kill him; he just wanted to silence him. So there, I think it could have ended. Yeah. But then he put some shards in his eyes menacingly and
because
summons the demons or something.
Well, because the whole story was like the story is full of references to the Oedipus story. It's ancient Greek tragedy where the son of a king is destined to kill his father and take the father's wife, so his mother. So the father exiles him, and he grows up and not knowing he's a prince. And then he grows up and he accidentally kills his own father, not knowing that that was his own father, and then accidentally marries his own mother.
Yeah.
Again, not knowing that that was his own mother. And also the son Oedipus. So he had, he could see the future. He had...
I didn't remember that part. Okay.
What was it? What is it called?
Parisians.
Yes.
Parisians.
Anyway, yeah, he can see the future. So in the end, he, after finding out that he killed his own father, and so essentially that he realized the prophecy, he blinds himself. And
I forgot that part. I didn't remember that he blinds himself. Okay, never mind.
He blinds himself, or someone else blinds him. Anyway, he becomes blind, and he becomes a wandering, blind fortune teller, essentially.
Waiting for the Dune reference.
I will not make it, but it could be a very clear Dune reference. But the ending of this story was clearly, because throughout the story they reference different stories which treat the same father and son conflict. So they talk about King Lear, like the Shakespeare tragedy, and Oedipus several times, and so the ending is clear reference to
I see. That. So I didn't get that part. Sorry, I'm not very good with classical literature.
Okay.
Which this story is full of references of classical literature, full of it, quotes of it, names. If you imagine somebody as dumb as me, I have no idea who they are. But that's why I like this story, because even though I didn't know who they were or what the story actually was, they put it forward in such a way that I got the reference, even though I didn't know it, which I appreciate very much.
Yeah.
So that's very cleverly written. Yeah. You don't have to know the reference to appreciate the reference, which is very nice. Yeah. I don't think I've ever had that happen in a story.
Yeah, I wonder if they can understand our Dune references.
They can't.
Without reading Dune.
They
that
can't.
Would be the biggest success of my life.
Yeah. So that's how the story ends. And I'd like to look at some moments or quotes or thoughts, but I'd like Paolo to speak more because he got some notes.
Yes. So as I said before, so I'm not really that big into short stories. But I have some experience reading short stories, and in this specific case, the style reminded me a lot, and I think this is not a coincidence, of Stephen King's short stories.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, if you read Stephen King's short stories, it's very easy to understand that essentially he had an idea. He thought, this thing is cool, and I want to make a story about this thing.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And I feel like this short story is kind of the same. So the author had an idea, had a concept, and they said, I don't know what story I'd write, but I want to write a story about this.
Yeah, that's definitely how I think about things. That's probably why I like it.
So, and in this case, again, I feel like the idea was, again, the father-son conflict. I feel like his basic idea, the one he formed the story around, was using the father and son conflict as a conflict between, as we said before, more like rationalism and creativity. Because it reminded me about my favorite writer, who's the guy I told about in the first episode, is called Italo Calvino. One of his books is essentially a book where the story is, there is this tavern, and people gather at this tavern, and they have a deck of tarots, and they place the tarots on the table, and they use the tarots to tell a story. And then in the end, the stories cross paths, and at the end of the book, you can see the whole picture and all the stories that have been created using these tarot cards, which is kind of similar to this idea. And the other thing which reminded me of this is another story by Calvino, which is called, I don't know the English title, but Count Who Was Cut in Half.
Sounds intriguing.
It's like a fairy tale. Where this guy gets cut in half, and one half is super good, and the other half is super evil. But every character in that story is a metaphor for something else. And two of the characters, they are the representation of science and technology. And I feel like this is kind of the same in the sense that the three characters clearly the representation of something, and the father, as I said, is a scientist. And I think, again, on one side, it represents the adult, and adults tend to try to filter reality through realism and, again, science. And he also tries to commend the way world has to be seen. Again, it's a very deterministic way to see the world. In the story, it says that he creates life. He can, and the son accuses him of, he likes that because he has complete control about what the cells do, what the bacteria do. So it really feels like, again, the way a father and a scientist wants to have like their life to be, which is complete control over everything. On the other side, the son is kind of like the storyteller, so it's like the creative side of humanity, and again, which is very common in children. And his idea is that human actions and human behavior is not something that can be determined. It's not something that can actually be studied, which is, I felt like that was the point of the tarots, where like, yeah, you can use a software, but at the end of the day, you can just make stories. You can't really understand how it works. He exists as a critique to that way of seeing the world. And a point of the story which kind of hints at that from the beginning is, we didn't talk about this because, I mean, it's not that relevant of a detail. When they were about to have the child, the doctor said, that child will probably be a stillbirth, so he probably would die before being born, or even if he's born, then it would be really stupid. And the mother insists, and essentially the mother goes against science, and the son is the victory of
I see,
kind of like
makes sense.
Feelings and irrational behavior over science, because not only like he lives, but he becomes a genius. Which again, it's something that shouldn't have happened.
I guess that's very intentional to show this, which I completely missed. I have to admit.
No, I mean, it's okay. That's kind of like the way I looked at the story.
Oh, it's interesting.
I mean, I have no idea. I don't know.
You're reading so much into the story. It's fun because it's just 30 pages.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably I'm just making stuff up.
But that's exactly what goes through my mind too, that there's so many things you can just start thinking about. It's like a good starting point to consider many things. So it's kind of eye-opening.
Yeah, that's why that's what I really liked about the story was it's only 30-something pages, 36.
Yeah.
Even in such a short time, the author was able to condense all of this, like all of these concepts and all of these ideas and all of these possible readings. And
most of the things you said I didn't even think about, so that's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things that is like the main premise, like we said, is the idea that you live with stories and identify with stories, which always comes up somehow in my life. Like the fact that people always seek meaning and they always want to put themselves in a story, and everything you think about, you think of it as a story.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a like limiting concept that makes you have a narrative and search it, and that makes you become it. And then there is a quote that we were supposed to put at the end, but I'll just say it now, and I'll just paraphrase.
That's okay.
And that's that. They like ask a question, or they ponder about it. That is it that we tell true stories, or is it that because we tell the stories they are true? So it's like a point that they stop at, and I think this is the perfect like circular logic, free will, language thinking problem explanation that always comes up, and that is that maybe all this discussion about destiny and like meaning and free will is a problem of language and like thinking. It's not a problem of the universe.
No, it is narrative.
Yeah.
Personally, I see that all the time in sports, because you can clearly see that happening in real life, where you could have a very plain way of saying things, where it's just like, there are two teams, one team wins because it's stronger and they played better, whatever. On the other hand, you can create a story and try to understand, why has everyone reached that point? What are all of the backstories? What are the feelings, either real or perceived? So I think it's a very interesting real life experiment of that, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. It's impossible to find yourself being locked in a pattern that is somehow familiar, experienced, or resembling something, which is so strange to think about. If you consider that everything that you decide, consider, like live, it's always fitting in some kind of story, which makes me very scared in connection to this short story. Like sometimes I think about it because it's like it like gives power to people who lay out tarot cards, because they can like force this story onto you, which is another quote that I'll read at the end, that the father says blah blah blah, and the son is like, okay, just shut up and stop forcing your story on me. Like, that's like the part that hate me. It's like,
no, I agree. And that's really interesting. I guess, like, okay, this would be my main critique to the story, because as I said before, I really love that aspect of stories and books where they analyze this aspect of destiny, whether it's real, whether characters are bringing things upon themselves, or it is actually destiny. And I feel like in this book, the problem is that it's either like too short or too long.
Okay.
In the sense that in a few parts, it feels like you're really pushing the reader to see certain things. On the other hand, you're not really
going into it.
Yeah, you're not really going into
I get that. That's definitely a problem with this. Yeah.
I mean, I understand, like, if you want to write a short story, like, you're not writing a full novel, so you're not going into the details. And I'm not sure, like, this story would make sense as a full novel. Like, probably would be just a very boring 200-page novel. But at the same time, like, sometimes it feels like, you're giving me all of these things, and you're kind of like pulling me in this direction to making me reason on these things, which is good, but at the same time, like,
it's absolutely a fair critique, and that's why I wouldn't call this like one of the best stories I've read. I already called it that, but I think like the best story ever, because it's only the idea that he started with, and then he like stapled a story onto it, like it's exactly like I said. So that is a product of that, and doesn't allow you to go into detail and make interesting like world building, characters, whatever. So you can't really go into it. It's done. It's just like, okay, I wanted to tell you this. It's done, and there you have it.
That's my biggest.
Because that's also why it's so short. Because he used only very short description of the characters. We don't know what the father's like. We don't know what the mother's like. We don't know what the son is like. We just know like this is one character trait that we get into in like a very satisfying detail. But we don't know anything about the people, which is so strange. Yeah,
and also like we get like an idea of their relationships, but at the same time we don't really get that much. I don't want to turn this into a big complaint or anything. As I said before, I think it's a very good read, and it's just that it's clearly lacking something.
Oh yes.
or it's giving you too much. Like, again, it's kind of like stuck in the middle. This is why I'm usually left unsatisfied by short stories. And this is why, like, on the other hand, if we want to go back to King, like, I feel like that's what he does really well, because with some stories where he wants to just exploit a cool idea he had, like, he usually does it well, where, like, the stories are not memorable. Like,
so you feel more satisfied with his?
Yeah, because, like, they are very entertaining and they are very limited, but he knows where to stop. Like, he knows where to say, like, I'm not expanding on this too much. I'm just like, this is just a short story. It's just a cool thing I wanted to do. Here, read it, be entertained for like the 2 hours it takes you to read it if you're slow like me.
That's why it's so adaptable for movies. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. On the other hand, if he wants to really explore something, then he writes a 1,000-page book, like It or something.
Maybe that's why it's so acclaimed, like respected writer. This story, perfect critique, I wouldn't have said it better. It's exactly just one idea, and we don't get into anything, and it feels like it's too much and not enough at the same time.
Yeah,
that's true. One more thing I have written down is the father's self-righteousness. Like, I was trying to find the word, and I can't say in English or Czech or Japanese, I don't know. I couldn't find this like adjective. I want to say, I found like smugness or stuffiness or like self-righteousness or like self-empoweredness. Like, what I'm trying to say is the father is so sure of what is good for the son, and
okay.
And he,
so it's lack of self-doubt.
Yeah, but also he is very rational and logical, so he tries to find all the explanations and rationalizations. He is genuinely trying to be good, and he's genuinely trying to help the son, and he's genuinely trying to like even when they buy the tarot card, he's like, okay, I am sure he wants them, and I'm sure
he tries to be a good father,
and he does what seems to be from the sum of all parts the good decision, but he doesn't allow any other like input. That's what I'm trying to say, this characteristic.
Right. So it's kind of like
he thinks that by doing so much research he has to be right, and nobody knows any better, so shut up. And I'm deciding because I know how it's supposed to be done, and I am like self-righteously like justified by doing all this like rationalizing.
So I would say that's true. He lacks the ability of seeing himself from outside.
Yes, that's exactly. Self-reflectiveness.
You
like self-reflectiveness.
Yeah, I feel like I completely understand what you want to say. I can't really think of
this. Is a thing that pisses me the fuck off so hard. Like, you can see this. So I want to like call this a name. Because so many people do this. Like, they mean well, and they do well, but they do it so wrong. And it's so infuriating. Yeah,
because in most cases it comes down to lack of communication.
That's also a point. Yes.
Just like lots of time people want to really mean well, but they can't and the reason, express like their intentions or feelings.
And the reason I hate it is that's what leads to all the like insanity.
Yeah.
That's what leads to like you not knowing what you don't know and what you should and shouldn't be doing, and doing the like my fear of getting into something to improve it and making it better so much more by not knowing how you improve it. So that's how it starts, I feel. So
that's true. Like the whole point is he never thinks about like his son's true feelings. He never asks.
Okay.
Which I guess like it's a very male problem. I mean, it is true. Like not talking about feelings and not discussing any of that. So.
Yeah. Great. So to finish, I would like to read you some quotes. One of them was like a comment after the father finally decided to come and have his tarot cards laid out, and then when they talked about it. So the son said,
Laios died only because he would not let his son pass along the road. Pass along any road you please. And I am the devil. You and mother were in Eden when I came. Because of me you were cast out, and now you're in hell. How neatly it all fits. For you to achieve your dream, you had to kill me with your story. When I lay there with your blades in my back, only then you could be sure that your sepulchre was safe. When you exiled me in a boat I could not live in, only then you could be safe, you thought. But I am the horned child, and the boat bore me quickly across the sea to my true kingdom. This isn't anything coming from the computer, said Alvin. This is just you being a normal, resentful teenager. Just a phase that everyone goes through. Joe's grip on Alvin's arm only tightened. I didn't die, I didn't wither, I have my power now, and you're not safe. Your house is broken, and you and mother are being thrown through it to your destruction, and you know it. Why did you come to me, except that you knew you were being destroyed?
Damn, sick burn.
Yes.
It was a little bit like on the nose and aggressive, but at the same time kind of like fun, I guess, to say in that way, because he just wanted to really show his father that
who's boss.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the point where the father finally stopped like rationalizing and it broke him.
Yeah.
And right after that they talked about how to fix it.
So the quote is, 2 ways, said Joe. There is one way you can save yourself. Alvin looked at the cards on the screen. Exile. Just leave. Just go away for a while. Let us alone for a while. Let me pass you by. Stop trying to rule. Stop trying to force your story on me. And then, after a while, we can see what's changed. Oh, excellent. A son divorcing his father? Not too likely. Or death. As the deliverer. As the fulfillment of your dream. If you die now, you defeat me. as Laios destroyed Oedipus at last.
Thank you for reading that in a much better voice.
No problem. Again, I'm not sure. Maybe it's terrible. Please check.
No, it's much better. I just mumble too much. So thank you for listening, and see you on the next episode where we tackle another short story, this time of Paolo's choosing.
Yay!
I wanted to call you the depression specialist, but I think the connoisseur of despair sounds better.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I can put that down as my profile description.
When you're Twitter verified, you can just put connoisseur of despair.
Yeah. All right. I'll probably do that.
Thank you for listening to episode 2 of the Mind Duck Books podcast. On the next episode, we'll delve into H.P. Lovecraft and 2 short stories, The Nameless City and The Dreams in a Witch House. We're really excited about recording this podcast, so we've already planned many episodes, all the way up to 10. So we'd like to ask you to spread the word, rate us on iTunes, Apple Podcasts. If you know somebody who's got an iPhone, beat him, push him, make him hit those stars, because it means a lot in the world of podcasting. Don't subscribe to us on YouTube. Don't follow us on Instagram. Don't go to Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, or any of the other platforms we're on. Nobody cares. Just rate us on Apple Podcasts, please. It would be very much appreciated. Thanks again, and see you in the next one.